I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Very happy to be back with you. Hope you all are doing at least as well as could be expected. Please do, like my comrade and brother Ear Doctor says, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, and jump on in here. We are not crew, and I don't know him, but like Math Hoffa says on his, get in here. Get in here. Now, come on in, jump in, let somebody know, come on in, get your boom bap breakfast while I hold it down for the Remix Morning Show crew, who will be back in full effect on Tuesday next week. I'll be back on Monday with the I Mix What I Like edition of the Remix Morning Show. Brother Kaba will be joining me this morning. Dr. Mjiba Freyawat will be joining me this morning. Dr. Abdul Al-Kalimat will be joining me this morning to talk about his brand new book, dropped, I think, yesterday. Mine is on its way. The History of Black Studies, brand new, from Black Studies legend, Abdul Al-Kalimat. So he'll be here with us as well. And a number of different things to get into. So shout out to everybody. Greetings to those who are joining us here live this morning. Greetings to those of you who will see this later on. Saludos también, Deborah. Yes, indeed. Appreciate it. Grand Rising. Greetings, Shirley. Yes, indeed. Peace, Ricky. And welcome, Dante Ferguson. Yay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Welcome. And please consider joining Brother Dante. Click that join, like, subscribe, hit that bell, get all your notifications so you can keep up with everything that's happening. Yeah. So, well, while we wait for folks to get in, let me get to a couple of things while folks are joining us this morning and guests are on their way, etc. and so forth. Couple things that we can do here that I did want us to get to. One of which is an update on Mumia via Prison Radio. In March of this year, after being denied care at the infirmary in SCI Manahoy, Mumia was transferred to the hospital and diagnosed with congestive heart failure. He had emergency double bypass surgery. When Mumia's hepatitis C in 2015 became acute and remained untreated, the prison's negligence led to renal failure and diabetic shock. We mobilized, organized, and put international pressure on the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. It took over a year, but with your help, we won a preliminary injunction that forced the prison to stop denying critical care and give him fast-acting viral cure. His case for medical neglect is set for trial in April of 2022. Prisoners across the nation have used this precedent-setting injunction to receive the life-saving cure to acute Hep C infections. As he recovers from heart surgery, Mumia needs our help. Right now, we are bringing the bright hot spotlight on the prison. The food on the trays at SCI Manahoy causes diabetes and poor heart health. This, combined with the total lack of yard time and solitary confinement, as a result of COVID lockdowns has created lethal conditions for folks in the prison. The food on the trays at SCI Manahoy causes diabetes and poor heart health. This, combined with a total lack of yard time in solitary confinement as a result of COVID lockdowns, has created lethal conditions for our folks in prison. Healthy food is a human right. Food is medicine. Our loved ones deserve the dignity of a nutritious diet. A cardiac diet and exercise are critical when recovering from heart surgery. It is the best medicine. You cannot repair your heart and let it heal without exercise and while being forced to eat white bread, white starch, salt, sugar, and meat. A health diet has to be mostly fresh plants and vegetables. Mumia has not received the critical cardiac diet prescribed in the hospital. The prison has been plagued by COVID lockdowns, and he only gets out of his cell often for minutes a day to use the phone. He is in solitary in a small cell with 6 feet of walking space. When they are not on lockdown, he can walk in the yard once a day and the day room 2 times a day. Please consider writing and reaching out to Secretary Little and demanding healthier foods for our friends and family inside. Oh, well, I didn't mean to do that, but shout out to Marcel P. Black, who caught up here with Moo Fresh. What I meant to do was, wait a minute, go do this. Go to the next slide. Please send Secretary Little the following message, which you can get here on Prison Radio's Instagram. It's also on my Instagram. I just reposted it. Anyway, as it reads here, you can see for yourself. And then on the next one, it has the number and an email address. And I think, let's see. I don't know. Is anybody going to be there this early? Let's see. 728-4109.
You've reached EBSOT, Special Assistant to the Secretary. If this call is regarding an inmate, I will provide an email address for you. In that email address, please indicate who the person is or their number and the institution where they're located in the subject line of the email. Please use the following email: RA-CR office of rds@pa.gov. Again, RA-CR office of D as in dog, S as in Sam, at pa.gov. Otherwise, please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right. So, well, we just follow up by email. I don't want to leave a message that they're going to ignore anyway. But anyway, so please do check out prisonradio.org or Prison Radio on Instagram for this information and follow up and show some support for Mumia as he continues to need it. And as I'll continue to remind, there's not enough support among the so-called alternative press for political prisoners in general, Mumia specifically. So while he's sometimes considered a celebrity prisoner of sorts, it's still not enough. And some of the folks with the biggest outlets and echo chambers continue to, for some strange set of reasons, be unwilling to raise up his name and offer their support. So I've been seeing even again a deserved uptick in some coverage around Julian Assange and some of the new information or continuing to come out information around the CIA attempts to destroy him psychologically, maybe even kill him physically. So I've seen some of that around Julian Assange, who does deserve to be free, deserves support. but as even longer held political prisoners and journalists who reveal state secrets and the behavioral patterns of empire, like Mumia, continue to be suffering torture and slow motion death measures with very little attention. And so anyway, okay, so we did want to do that. Then another thing to get into briefly before our guests show up is, I do have to bring this up again, and I cannot help it, speaking of while we're here on Instagram. But yesterday, I cannot at this point fully get into the context. I've done a little bit of that here on this platform. We'll continue to do so. But I will also continue to encourage people to please check out imixwhatilike.org for the Not a Different World HBCU project. And if you've been a student, faculty, admin, staff, parent, friend, maybe not friend, but parent, something more deeply engaged with an HBCU experience, and you want to share it, whatever that experience is or experiences are, please do. There's a little survey there and some more information on the project, and I invite your participation. And when that project at some point is complete and comes out, the full story and context of what happened yesterday and continues to happen and reverberate will be, fully laid out. And I cannot wait. But in the time being, I just have to shout out, just in general, Dr. Cornel West for not only coming through Morgan State yesterday, but dropping my name and that of Dr. Wimbush. And I say that because, again, the full context can't be laid out and I think appreciated. But I will say this. Let me pull this up here and just show you what I'm talking about if you haven't seen it. I cannot help but enjoy this.
For me, exemplary of what it means to come to terms with three things that I want to highlight this morning: vocation, tradition, and revolution. Vocation, tradition, and revolution. I know we got Brother Raymond Wimbush. I love and respect so deeply. Jared Ball and some of the other faculty. We should just give it up for faculty here at Morgan State University.
Give it up for the faculty. So that was it. That was it. And I so please go check out the interview that I and my colleagues did here at BPM with Cornel West a couple weeks ago. I still contend it is seminal in nature. I have to this day, and I'll be happy to be checked on this and invite people to send me stuff if they have it. I've never seen Cornel West engage the way we did. He certainly wasn't yesterday. I've never seen it. So the conversation we had with him was very, very different than I've seen almost anywhere ever. So please check that out. But as I wrote him last night after the fact, Dr. West, I appreciate you shouting, referencing my name. And I said at one point I'd be happy to lay out the full context, but I think he understands. He's been enough in the game and he's suffered enough in his own career to understand what goes on behind the scenes. And I thought, so I just want to say in general that it is important beyond the legit appreciation for someone. There is a political value to raising up certain names when you enter certain spaces. You don't know what's going on with folks behind the scenes. You don't know the context. So when the president of the university gets up and gives a rousing introduction and is sitting right there in the front row, and when a former colleague is sitting poised and waiting to engage as the keynote interviewer, and then he goes up there and says just that little bit, it reverberates. It has already begun to echo. Just that little bit has already begun to echo. So I encourage other folks, like, you never know if you're somewhere, and I'm not in Cornel West crew. I mean, we're not tight like that. But which is why I've always said I appreciate him. He is willing to engage those on his left, and he's willing to publicly defend and support those on his left, whether it's a little individual faculty member at an HBCU, whether it's broadly speaking Palestinians or political prisoners. I got to give him credit for that. And that little bit has meant, I think, a lot. Has made a profound statement about a number of things going on. And then when Dr. Felicia Thomas, so I'll put the link in here when we post, later on, or in the show notes for this program, for this episode or this show. So folks want to see the whole thing, they can. But when Dr. Felicia Thomas gets up during the Q&A and he runs out and gives her a hug, because they have some, I guess they go back when I think she was a student of his at Princeton. And when she gets up and asks Dr. West, could you say a word or two about the value of liberal arts? And he goes into a few-minute statement about the value and importance of liberal arts to the Black tradition, to academic life, to the world. These are powerful and subtle contributions to a struggle that is happening behind the scenes, not only at Morgan, but throughout HBCUs, and I would argue throughout higher education, which is, again, this sort of attack, not sort of, an overt, I think, and others have written about it more eloquently, an overt attack on liberal arts and critical radical thought in favor of science, technology, engineering, and math, which has been thought of for a long time to be a more constraining set of fields. So when liberal arts are underfunded or defunded, and more vocational and corporate and military sponsored education encroaches and impedes, when you have somebody like Cornel West come through, and who a lot of people will know because they saw him in The Matrix or they see him on TV, they don't read his work. They don't really listen to his speeches, and many of them don't really rock with his politics. But when that brand comes in and says something from the small to the medium to the grand, it's powerful. So I had to shout him out for that, and I really appreciate him coming through and doing that. So anyway, so I just wanted to get to that real quick. Shout out to Dr. Cornel West, and I appreciate I appreciate that. Now, his conversation yesterday was interesting. It was largely centered around, he was encouraged and invited almost exclusively to talk about his criticism of Obama, which I thought was an interesting set of questioning, and said a lot, I think, about where the Black community and Black journalism and Black education is, when so much of his time, I felt, was being made to hold account for how he could become such a critic of Obama. So even he had to start by reminding everybody, I did 65, he said, events for Obama in the run up to the election. And then as soon as he started bringing in, that Wall Street, Goldman Sachs crew, then I became immediately a critic. Now, of course, some of us were already saying that was going to happen. and had even said directly to Dr. West, this is why you shouldn't support him, because this is exactly what he's going to do. He's already said he's going to do it. So it wasn't a surprise to some of us that he did that. That is, Obama did that with his cabinet. But I thought it was more interesting than what West's positions are or were on Obama. I thought it was more interesting that the line of questioning from former Black commercial journalists was basically explain to our Black community why you had become one of Obama's staunchest Black public intellectual critics, etc. And instead of, I think, investigating more interestingly, given his rare appearances on our campus, Cornel West's career or his ideas or his writing or his activism or his struggles with academia in defense of Palestinians, etc. Instead of that, it was almost, an hour and a half of why did you go at Obama? And, so anyway, shout out to Dr. Felicia Thomas. I was very glad she asked that question about liberal arts. And again, shout out to Dr. West for dropping my name in that of Dr. Winbush, because it echoes. And more on that when that project comes out. I'm telling you, it's going to be anyway. All right. So my man is here. Brother Kaba is ready to join us. So I will bring him up here and greet him and invite him to the conversation. Good morning, good brother. Good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm well. Good morning. Always good to be with you. And good morning to the family. It's always good for me to be here on I Mix What I Like with Dr. Jared West. I mean, Dr. Jared Ball. Excuse me.
Yeah, I can see it marinating. I can see it coming. You could almost see it working itself out. I'm gonna get him. Hey. Yeah. Anyway.
No, but I think that that's great in a sense. I think, sometimes we're socialized in this culture, man, by movies and things, and just by the culture in general. And we kind of couch things in, absolutes, where, you got an absolute good guy and an absolute bad guy. And, movies are starting to kind of change it, ironically. You start to look at the anti-heroes and things like that. But for the most part, that particular paradigm is in place. And I think a lot of times, people are not using sophistication when dealing with people like a West or anybody else for that matter. And it's always like, well, this person, said this that I don't like, so therefore, so on and so forth. And that's not to say that, as you explained, that's not to say that, he's necessarily where we are or has the same, ends and objectives as we. But I think when somebody does something that's worthy of note, I think we should, give them their credit, while at the same time still disagreeing with them, fundamentally, politically. We can at least give credit where it's due. And I think it's also ironic that that as West helped to legitimize Obama and then foment this kind of hate that he got, and in return for being principled in his particular stances once he saw what Obama was, on that end, he's also doing the same thing for you now. So, he's helping you in a sense by just shouting you out. So it's kind of interesting, how that turnabout goes. Just so I just wanted to point those few things out.
No, yeah, I mean, you're right. And it would have been anyway. For instance, I just think it's fascinating how the whole thing went yesterday. And again, I'll put the link in here in the show notes. But if people want to see because again, more than what the conversation was, the way it was conducted, I think says a lot about the state of Black politics and journalism and so on. I mean, for instance, I kept thinking we're in an academic setting. You got Cornel West, and not only does none of his career really come up, but it would have been great to even bring up his. I mean, there was no discussion of his backs and forth with Dyson or Ta-Nehisi Coates I mean, there's so many avenues of conversation, because and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this. The sort of the banner headline of the talk was the role of the Black intellectual. So he's been in all of these. I mean, even going back to his exchange with Dr. Clark years ago. I mean, he's been in all of these different exchanges and been but that was not the conversation.
Well, actually, it was the conversation. Actually, it was the conversation. The role of the Black intellectual is to protect the Black elites, and that's what they were doing.
Okay.
Obama is the Black.
Wow.
He is the quintessential. He's the essence. He's the quintessential example of the Black elite, and they were doing their job. Ironically, though, to my larger point, that's what they thought West was doing initially. They thought that he was on board with them to that degree.
Right.
So how could you, a member of our class, basically betray your mission, which is to elevate, Black elitism, Black exceptionalism and all these kinds of things, so-called Black excellence and all these kinds of things. I'm all for Black excellence, but not from the perspective of Black elitism, and I think sometimes that's what's being promoted. But I'm all for us being excellent. I'm just not in the way that it's promoted. Across.
More broadly speaking, yeah. Did your audio drop on everywhere? Or was that just for me? Yeah, I don't hear you for some reason. Is that my fault? Hold on a second. Wait, say something now? Yeah, now, okay. Yeah, it's low though. I don't know what happened. Yeah, it was good, and then because now it's really low and distant.
Well, I was talking about Obama, and then I guess they got me. So.
Yeah, now it's like you lost the mic. It's like your mic got unplugged or something. I don't know. Now I don't hear anything.
Wow.
Now I hear everything. Now it sounds really good. Now it sounds really good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me stop. I'm not gonna say anything else about Obama negative.
Okay? Yeah. Let's leave Barry alone and because I did. So I just got word. Okay. So Dr. Mjiba Freyawat is unfortunately slightly delayed. I was about to say detained, but I don't want to misreport or send up the she's just delayed, not detained.
She was talking about Obama too, so they got her.
She's over there in Ghana talking about Barry over there. They were like,
"Hey man, Africom's over there, boy."
So she'll be here as soon as she can. But in the meantime, okay, there are a couple things that I think you and I could get to in the meantime before she gets here, because I do want to talk with, and if not, we'll just have her back another time, or we'll have her back another time anyway, because this new film she's done is really good and really important. But anyway, so again, I cannot help it. So I have my buying power Google alert set, and sure enough, I got this hit from the other day, yesterday. A new campaign, Reach Media and Radio One, the audio divisions of Urban One Inc., unveil the Millions, Billions, Trillions movement for their 2021 virtual radio upfront experience. Right up the road here in Silver Spring, Radio One and Reach Media, the audio divisions of Urban One Inc., the largest diversified Black-owned media company in the country, announced today its virtual upfront experience, Millions, Billions, Trillions. In partnership with Dream Currency, a small Black-owned business, Millions, Billions, Trillions focuses on a movement to promote the importance and buying power of the African-American consumer. So as you see, some of the celebrity hosts on the network are wearing the, this is from Dream Currency, the Millions, Billions, Trillions apparel. But as I continue to argue and try to clarify what is being argued here, well, is laid out very clearly here in just a second. Radio One and Reach Media together make up the country's largest urban audio network, covering 90% of the country's African-American population, and reaching 31 million monthly listeners. In addition, Radio One and Reach Media properties reach 90% of all Black listeners who tune in to Black-owned radio stations each week. By working with Radio One and Reach Media, brands will engage millions of African Americans, access billions of impressions, and unlock trillions in spending power. So you can see the slogan there, where it comes from, and again, how it's being laid out. And again, what I'm arguing is the actual purpose. Again, this is a press release or an article that is not targeting Black consumers or audience members. It is not targeting the Black community. It is targeting ad buyers, often white corporations looking to advertise, who spend upwards of $500 to $600 billion a year totally on revenue, and Black media want to get their cut. So to do that, they're promoting, as it says here, that brands, that is ad buyers, will engage millions of African Americans, access billions of impressions, and unlock trillions in spending power, which of course means the $1+ trillion buying power claim that is often made, and is again meant to be spent with the corporations buying the ads in those spaces. Through our national multimedia operations, we provide, that is Urban One Inc., provide advertisers with a unique and powerful delivery mechanism to the African American and urban audiences. So again, this explains again who they're talking to. Through our national multimedia operations, we provide advertisers with a unique and powerful delivery mechanism to the African American urban audiences. So that's what buying power is. It's a measurement. It's of what is to be captured by the delivery mechanism of what claims to be Black owned, Black independent, Black media, but is there to deliver, to serve as a delivery mechanism, delivering Black audiences to white corporations advertising, and to deliver white corporate ad revenue to Black owned commercial media. It is then falsely and misreported, misrepresented, misunderstood as an economic strength that Black people do not have. So that was it. Again, wanted to show how this whole thing works and where it is, how it's playing out once again.
So basically, it's they're the pimps, and the Black audience is the hoe, and the white corporations advertise. That they advertise. The advertisers are the Johns, and we can deliver. We got this money.
Well put.
The only problem is they ain't got enough hoes.
That's always the struggle, right? And this, by the way, is the dream.
Shout out to all the sex workers too.
Absolutely.
No disrespect.
No disrespect. Dream Currency, based in Atlanta. It's a small fashion brand lifestyle movement. Some fly gear that celebrities apparently have been wearing. Rest in peace, DMX. But this is the company that's being teamed up with, and I mean, again, it's nice. I don't mind supporting it. If people want to support, that's fine. But this is not a pathway to wealth creation for a community. This is just
what's the path of wealth creation for the advertisers. What little wealth they could extract from us.
That's right.
And actually for the more so for Urban One or Reach Media and all of them, because they're going to use that.
They're going to use that. I mean, and that is always the point, that the real, the real determinant of content is not the race, gender, sexual orientation, even class of ownership. It is the advertisers. And that's why Urban One, a lot of the content, particularly when I used to look at the radio, the music side, mirrors the same commercial expression you see in other commercial media. I mean, it's because it's advertiser driven, and that's why we don't have enough alternatives. That's why the work that you do with PFW, that we're doing with BPM and others, this is why this kind of work is important, because that's in part what we're up against. And unfortunately, this is where the class issue comes into play within our community, because then we're pitted against one another often, consciously or not, to produce messages or ideas that inhibit, radical behavioral differences, doing some, being different politically, culturally, etc. So there was one other thing that came up that I just saw yesterday. Unless you had more on that, I did. There is something else I wanted to that now Comedy Hype, who we talk a little bit about here, is doing Chappelle Week. They've just given in to the Chappelle story and its echoes, and they had on Brother Khan. I forgot his full name. Is it Rashawn Khan? Yeah, Rashawn Khan, who was a former bodyguard to a number of comedic legends, including Richard Pryor. And he was invited on to recount some similar experiences that Richard Pryor has had in relationship to the LGBTQ community, that a lot of folks have forgotten and that has recently been misreported in The Guardian. So I want to play this clip, which I think is fascinating and raises a lot of important issues, and I think some of which we've tried to deal with here as it regards to the latest Chappelle stand-up routine, or his last series even. But I just want to play this little clip. It speaks for itself.
And from my understanding, he was eventually booed off stage because some of the jokes that he did make. Now, the backstory is when he got there, he took issue to some of the things he was saying, specifically
talking about Richard
about
Pryor,
how gay people were treating the Black workers as well as the Black artists that were there. And I want to read a quote, and then I want to pass this to you. So according to The Guardian, this is the moment when they started to boo Richard Pryor off stage. The quote says that they said, Richard Pryor said was, "I hope the police catch you MFers and shoot your aide accidentally, because you MFers aren't helping niggas at all." Mm-hmm. So that was the moment, according to The Guardian, when they said he was booed off. I know you being his bodyguard, you were there, so I just want to know what are your thoughts, and what exactly happened?
Well, first of all, that's not what happened. When we went to it, we was told it was human rights. And then when we got there, we found out it was gay rights. So I looked at Richard like, what are you going to do now? And he said, I don't know. And he walked around, and there was a group of young Black kids that was booked for the show to do this here fire act. They were cleared by the Los Angeles Fire Department and all the departments that okayed it. But it was an asshole captain there. And he seen the kids rehearsing. And he told them they couldn't do it. And they produced all of their papers, and he still said no. So Richard seen that happen. And that's when he said, I know what I'm going to talk about. And then when he went out on the stage, he talked about an abuse that he experienced as a kid. And it's on one of his albums. And when you listen to it, you'll laugh at it, but that was something that actually happened to him. And he was talking about a group of guys that caught him, beat him up. And one of them put his dick in his mouth and then slapped him in the head and said, you don't even know how to suck dick right. And they let him go. And so Richard said when he went home and he was sitting down with his family eating, his father said to him, you're not going to eat that sausage on your plate. And Richard couldn't tell his father, I can't eat the sausage because that dick taste is still in my mouth. Mm-hmm. So you laughed at it. It's a joke. That didn't happen to nobody. That couldn't have happened. And it was a joke. But it was something that really happened to him. So he took that to the stage and he told the gay audience that he set it up by saying, yeah, I sucked a dick before. And the audience applauded him. He wasn't condoning it. He was just telling him his experience. And they stood up and they cheered him, and he said, I know what it is to have a dick in your mouth. And he just He just built that up. And he said, but I just have one question to ask you. You always want us to support you. And at that time, he was talking about Black people.
Mm-hmm.
It was real clear what he was talking about because he knew why he was there. And he said, I noticed that you always want us to support whatever gay cause you're talking about. I notice you never support Black people and their causes. And that's when they start booing him.
So to stand corrected, that's the actual quote,
That's what he
not
said
the
to
quote
him.
here. It's
No.
him saying,
That's what Donald Trump said is fake news. That's nonsense. He said, this is what I noticed about you, the gay people. And that's then and that's now. The gay, whoever is going out against Dave Chappelle, that same organization, whoever they are, they don't support Black transgender people being killed, gay Black people they don't support it. So you got to say, who are they?
that's a great.
So, I mean, I thought that was a powerful story. I thought it was now I did not remember it that way. And forgive any background noise, but shout out to the trash collectors. Appreciate that work. Hope that check is fat and that healthcare is better. But so anyway, that was a powerful story.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember that story. I
don't
remember
either.
vaguely the incident. I remember seeing footage from the performance where you hear the crowd booing him and him, making those. I don't remember him telling that joke. I feel like I would remember that, but I do remember him saying something to the effect that he didn't feel that the gay community supported Black people in the way that they wanted to be supported by the Black community. And he was booed. So I thought it was interesting that Rashawn Khan would bring up that story and be invited to tell that story in the context of what's happening with Chappelle. And I don't know. So I mean, to me, it felt like that's sort of the direction I've been trying to go in my understanding of what Chappelle is doing here, that he's not attacking the LGBTQ plus community. He's attacking white folks who dress themselves in it and then play some solidarity thing. When in fact, as Khan is saying, they don't even care about the Black members of their own LGBTQ collective. And then want to condemn Dave for raising this contradiction in the way he did it. And I just thought it was fascinating. Anyway, go ahead.
I just reiterate what I said before. When it's only Black, when it's only Black people who are aggrieved, none of these people come around. And I mentioned this before. Last weekend, 16th of October, made 26 years that I've been plant-based, vegan, whatever. I don't even call myself vegan per se, but and again, the same thing in that community. Black people are fine to talk about the whale rights and the zebras running around here in Prince George's County and all whatever. It's fine to talk about all of that. If you're vegan and you want to talk about, you can speak up, you can raise your voice as loud as you want about all that, but don't say anything about specifically Black issues. And case in point, there's a brother after the George Floyd is very popular influencer. Black influencer, vegan influencer, he's a fitness guy, and all of that. After George Floyd, he brought up something about race and Black folks and all these white folks that follow him, that love him. Oh, you bringing up race? And he said the same thing. Okay, so I talk about all these other things around veganism. It's fine. I raise my voice about veganism. It's fine. But I start defending my Black people and asking where y'all at when it comes to that. All of a sudden you want to unfollow me and you want to call me a nigger. You want to do all of this and that, and that's what happens. And let's look at the Democratic Party. It's okay to talk about the voting if you're Black and we need to vote and we're Black as long as we're talking about voting for Democrats and this and that, but if you specifically bring up Black issues, we can't bring that up. That's not, it's not about, so I don't care what field of endeavor it is. Black people are fine to talk about it as long as it's within the context of that particular group. But when you start talking about issues that specifically affect Black people, that's the same thing with Cornel West. When Cornel West was bringing up the issues with Obama around Black people and just in general with the whole Chicago boys and stuff like that, that's when he started catching hell. Anytime Black people brought up issues with Obama and saying, well, what is he going to do? Oh, you can't just do anything. You can't do anything just for Black people because it's just for Black people because they're just Black people, which means that they don't matter. Okay. So I don't care. It's not just the Chappelle's, not just LGBTQ. You can take any issue, literally any issue. And as long as it only affects Black people, you can't, that it becomes illegitimate. It becomes a moot point. It becomes a point where people want to start talking about how you're anti this and anti that. And it's just nonsense. And I think too many of us fall for
it. Yeah. What else can I say other than I agree?
He wasn't on there. He wasn't on there like some of the old prior jokes and the old Eddie Murphy Delirious when he was talking about the gay jokes on that. Now there wasn't that. You can say that would be today, that wouldn't fly at all. But you remember Delirious when you talk about Mr. T and Ed Norton and all them. What if they were this and that? He wasn't doing that. He was simply stating.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It wasn't the guy from, I never watched the show, but the guy from Friends, I guess he was a so-called comedian, and he was up there yelling the N-word at Black people in the audience. Kramer, I think they call him Kramer.
Oh no, from Seinfeld. Yeah. Michael Richards.
I don't watch either one of them, so it's a white show. But
look, I used to watch Seinfeld all the time, and I used to watch, and then I used to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, which I think is a great show. But after that, I won't watch the Seinfeld anymore. And then Larry David had a thing on Curb Your Enthusiasm where they let Michael Richards come back and be redeemed. So I can't watch that anymore either. So I was, did I lose you? Did we lose your audio again?
Did you lose it?
No, go ahead. Okay. I thought.
Yeah, but that's my point. It wasn't what Dave did was not that. Okay?
Right,
but
that's right.
But people are characterizing it as if it was that, and it wasn't that.
That's a really good point, actually. He was not just doing some, whatever traditional gay joke or whatever. He wasn't doing any of that. But anyway, I just thought that was a fascinating and disturbing story about Richard Pryor. On multiple levels, not only what he experienced as a youngster, but then the reaction from the crowd. So listen, I'm not sure I'm not sure she's going to get here in time this morning. So I'll just take this moment to invite people to start with my admittedly insufficient summary review of Dr. Mjiba Freyawatt's film, which you can see at imixwhatilike.org. That is the review. And if nothing else, there are links here to where you can actually see the full piece. Umoja, Africa Must Unite Now, that is the title of the film. Because as I think I quickly summarized the other day, it does a number of important things. For me, most notably, it reminds not only of the broad and general Pan-Africanist traditions and accepts almost all versions, that is leftward leaning versions. That is, it doesn't seek to promote one particular approach over another. It just gives a nice overview, and then it includes some contemporary and even youthful voices from the African diaspora, and particularly throughout the African continent, disproving yet another myth that somehow continental Africans have no interest in Pan-Africanism. And I just think it's a really, it's a great and really important and timely film. So I definitely wanted to help promote it, and we'll have Dr. Freyawatt on whenever she can get here to talk about it. But I just wanted to again raise it up and encourage people to not only support the film but put it to good use within their intellectual and activist organizational circles or spaces, because it is. And then my other important point is that not only does it highlight women, but it's made by a truly Pan-African woman who is a true Pan-Africanist and admittedly of the AAPRP variety. But that perspective actually isn't imposed on the film. I happen to agree with it, but it's not imposed on the film. But my point is that so often we hear discussion of Black radical traditions from people who don't actually engage, work with, support, agree with those traditions themselves, and they're often well-paid, well-positioned, well-funded spokespersons meant
Peniel
to
Joseph.
yeah, exactly. Rebrand these ideas as something that they're not. So it's really good that not only is this made by a woman, featuring women, centering women historically and today, but someone who is actually an adherent to those politics. So shout out to her and congratulations to her for this work. And we'll catch up with her whenever she can get here.
Yeah, I mean, and
go
that's,
ahead.
I think I haven't seen it, but I think that's a great piece because, you know, I mean, women have always been at this. I mean, any movement of Black folk. I mean, I grew up in a Black Baptist church in the South, man. I mean, I don't care what organization you're talking about, if civil rights, whatever. I mean, if it wasn't for Black women, we just wouldn't have any kind of organization.
Right.
And I mean, case in point, my household, you know, like my wife passed away 6.5 years ago. I'm still trying to get organized, brother. It's rough out here, you know. That was
Man, I do
glue.
not.
Just from a micro to a macro. It's just the sisters got it. So
I obviously I can't imagine that loss, but the specific suffering of having to be in control of organizing the household is not. Look, I'll tell you straight up, my wife is going away for just this weekend, and I'm shook. I'm quietly shook. Like, what is supposed to happen over here? If and then like and into even the passing thought that would become an extended concern. Like, hold up, I gotta. Man. Yeah, man. From the hair, from my daughter's hair, something like that, to the macro organization of the finances and the paperwork.
My wife too.
Boy,
my wife handled she handled the finances. She did the budget. You know, she did the household budget. I mean, it's like, and she loved it. You know, I was like,
your audio again, man.
What about now?
Now there you go. Yeah.
Okay. Now I was saying my wife handled the budget in our house too. You know, I mean, she loved doing it, and I was like, good, you can have it, take it. You know, she did it. People used to look at me like funny, like, you know, your wife knows she gets your check. I'm like, yeah, that's my wife. I'm like, I wouldn't have married her if I couldn't trust her with no money. I mean,
what I said. Why are people? I was like, of course. I don't want this check. You don't, like Eddie said in life, you don't want to give me that gun, boss. I might shoot you with it. Like, you don't want to give me that check, boss. We'll be living in the parking lot by next week. Not to contradict my argument around buying power, but I am not the most responsible if left to my own devices. Or I put it differently, I'm just more flexible with the chronology of necessary payments, if I could put it that way.
That's
a
nice way.
How about that?
That's right up there with bio breaks, brother. That's yeah, get rid of the liberal arts, man. Get rid of the liberal arts. See, that's the kind of stuff y'all.
They're a mess. That's what I'm saying.
That's the product. That's the product of liberal arts education.
Right. You got to get people to focus on a specific task and leave them in that don't have them. You don't want to give me that freedom of thought, you know? Yeah.
But I got a few things. I don't know. Can I share? I don't know if I can share.
Oh, please.
Or not.
You should be able to. If not, just drop the link in the private chat and I'll share it.
Okay, hit this and y'all knock it off with the the what do they
Uh-oh.
call it? What they call us boomer, the boomer talk, knock it off.
Oh
I'm
boy.
working this out.
Yeah, I got
Okay.
oh man, I got hit with man. I got told I was telling dad jokes yesterday.
Oh, by your people?
Yeah, but my children, my
Oh man.
those formerly innocent children
Yeah, they used to love
have
you
now
so much and you could
become,
do no
yeah, they
wrong.
used to love me so much. Now they're teenagers, and now I'm a problem. I'm a different kind of problem all of a sudden. But anyway,
Can
go
you see
ahead
it?
and I'll let people know. Yeah, there it is, and I'll let people know while this is being pulled up that Dr. Al-Kalimat is set to join us. So we'll get to him in just a moment. So get yourselves ready for a rousing and powerful discussion about the history of Black studies. So get your coffees and your teas. But go ahead. Native Americans demand Fox News apology. Fox News offended indigenous people. Stop playing.
It's just amazing the caucasity, man. You know what this woman said, man. It's
The
like
caucasity.
she said because people were talking about Christopher Columbus, you know, this is during Native American Day or whatever they call it. That
Right,
used to be
right.
Columbus Day.
Indigenous Peoples Day.
Indigenous Peoples Day. And she said Christopher Columbus, by the way, is the first victim of cancel culture.
Oh, wow.
And then her husband who works with her, they burned villages, raped women, seized children. They took land. These are white folks. So I mean, that's the caucasity.
So is that the reason why he should not be canceled? Because he successfully led.
They're saying that the Native Americans did that. The Native
Americans burned villages, raped women,
the indigenous people,
raped women, seized children, and took land.
Right, that's what he said.
Wow. So Columbus shouldn't be canceled. They should be canceled.
And then
cancel the indigenous people.
Right. And so Sean Duffy, who this woman's husband, said that the struggles of Native Americans have everything to do with government dependency, alcoholism, and family breakdowns. You know, not the fact that they didn't have any of that before the Europeans came. And by the way, Columbus never even set foot here on this particular landmass. Anyway, he did all his dirt in the so-called Caribbean. You know, so I just thought that was just interesting. Just as a reminder. So if you want to cancel something, this is kind of stuff you want to cancel. So, and then of course,
wow.
This particular group here is trying to get these people fired. And then along that same level, and I gotta get ready to jump out of this room here for a second because I got stuff going. Yeah, so I gotta jump out here, and I'll come back and join you with something else because I gotta. Yeah.
All right.
So give me a second.
No problem. Thank you very much. Brother Kaba will be back with us in just a second, as will Dr. Al-Kalimat. So let's just take a quick break, come back, reset real quick, and get into this discussion of the history of Black studies. Back in just a minute. I mix what I like. All right, good people. Again, welcome back to I Mix What I Like live right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm very happy to be your host, Jared Ball. And to get into this next conversation, for anybody as myself on some level or others who are much more deeply ingrained in Black or Africana studies, at any point in their lives or any point in their careers, anyone who engages that field will have to have come across our next guest in one form or another. Dr. Abdul Al-Kalimat, among many other things, is a professor of African American Studies in Library and Information Science. He's been affiliated with the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He is the author of several books, including The Intro of Afro-American Studies, The African American Experience in Cyberspace, Malcolm X for Beginners. He curates Malcolm X research website, eBlack Studies. he has been a monumental contribution to the field, to the development of, again, what we call Black or Africana studies. And he's here to talk with us about a brand new book that I believe dropped yesterday, that my latest alert tells me is on its way to my mailbox. I believe this week, should be maybe even today. And that is The History of Black Studies by Dr. Abdul Alkalimat, who joins us now. Welcome, good sir, to the program. It's good to see you once again, albeit virtually. I hope you are at least as well as could be expected. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I do want to quickly pull up on screen at least the cover of this new book, which folks can see here, The History of Black Studies. And then let's just get into it. I'll ask the big, broad question. What is the history of Black Studies? How do you lay it out in this book? And for those of us like myself who have already set it up to be used as a text for our Intro to Black Studies course in the spring of 2022, what can we expect to get from it as faculty, instructors, and students alike?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question, because that enables me to give some kind of a broad framework for deeper discussion of any particulars. The fundamental issue here is that Black people have been rational about their own experience. This is a fundamental response to the racist attack that Black people have been sort of mentally deficient and not conscious of what's been happening, both historically before the European invasion of Africa and ever since. In this particular book, I look at Black studies in three fundamental ways. The first way is Black studies as intellectual history. This really covers the first two generations of Black PhDs who were trained at the most elite colleges and at the same time were refused employment in those institutions. And that, of course, led to the HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, becoming really centers of Black intellectual work and cultural development. And of course, also part of that Black studies as intellectual history is what happened in the community. One of the silences really is what happened in Black high schools, because many of these PhDs ended up teaching in high schools. Like in Dunbar and Pearl in DC and Nashville. And these were very important institutions. In Chicago, for example, Captain Diet led the jazz program, and many important figures came out of that. Same thing happened in New Orleans, and I covered New York, New Orleans, Chicago, and Los Angeles. So that's Black studies as intellectual history. Then there's the second section is Black studies as social movement, because one of the important points is that every significant social movement generated by Black activists also had an educational component. And these classes that were taught were not only taught to develop cadre for those movements, but were community-based educational efforts. And of course, Black history, the nature of exploitation and oppression, the question of Africa as origin, all of these issues were taken up. So I deal with 6 social movements: the freedom movement, the Black Power movement, the new communist movement, the feminist movement, the Black arts movement, and the student movement. And the last section of the 3 is Black studies as academic profession. This is the way people usually now think of Black studies in terms of it entering into the academic mainstream and as really one of the most important Black Power projects. So I look at several aspects of that. It's not sort of a linear narrative history, but rather a conceptual history that points to the crisis of conflict that initiated the process. Many building takeovers, protests by students and the community really created this opening in the academic mainstream. Then there was a search for consensus. There was institutionalization. There was professionalization. There was then the consolidation of theoretical positions, and the norming of research. So in a quick survey, the book deals with these three sections: Black Studies as intellectual history, Black Studies as social movement, and Black Studies as academic profession.
Right on. I'm gonna bring my colleague, Brother Kaba, back to the conversation as well. But Dr. Akalimat, I'm very glad. I was so excited to see in the table of contents that you have this section on HBCUs, because and I'd like to ask about that right off the top, because we hear all the time. It's, for instance, at Morgan State, I'm helping to usher in what has just been launched as the first, Black Studies program at Morgan State. And of course, the question comes up already in the first couple of semesters: why are we just now getting a Black Studies program at an HBCU? Why hasn't this always been part of the setup here? And that's also been part of the discussion of the rise of Black Studies historically, is where they originate. Why didn't they start on HBCUs, or what was the so could you talk a little bit about what your chapter will say? I can't wait to read it, but tell us a little bit about how you talk about HBCUs figuring in this history.
Yeah, this is really very important, because as you indicate, HBCUs really are dissed, as if there were nothing significant happened there. The reality is that the issues that were taken up in the academic mainstream were first taken up in the HBCU context. And I look at three case studies: Howard, Atlanta University, and Fisk. And these three institutions in particular were created to create the pathway for a Black middle class. And they were explicitly based on a Eurocentric curriculum. In other words, if you, at a certain point at Howard, for example, it was mandatory that you studied Greek and Latin extensively. And there were attitudes against really studying the Black experience. In other words, it was a Eurocentric orientation. And faculty eventually struggled over this matter. And not only was it a question of Black faculty getting jobs in the HBCUs, but transforming the curriculum. And what was really interesting, if you take Fisk, for example, the Jubilee Singers were really fundamental to establishing the credential globally of Fisk, singing the songs that Du Bois wrote about, the sorrow songs, the traditional songs of the Black church. And then literary and musical criticism was developed, which really laid the basis of the history of writing about Black music. So John Work and his son, teaching at Fisk, did very important work in this regard. So another important aspect of this that I point out is that African studies is often referred to as something that Herskovits created at Northwestern University. And the fact is that 10 years before Herskovits, Watkins and others created a African studies program at Fisk University. So again, this question of the agency of Black intellectuals in their own defense and in their own advocacy for an understanding of the Black experience is something that we have to struggle for. It's sort of like what the Cubans call the battle of ideas. And so at every stage. So anyway, the point about the curriculum, the point about hiring, the point about connecting to the community. Because what's interesting is that in places like Fisk and Atlanta University and Howard, actually, programs were created to link back to the community, so that there was an attempt to talk about the efficacy of knowledge in relationship to social progress. So the first People's College was created by Charles Johnson at Fisk around, for example, literacy education, home economics, health. So the students and faculty at Fisk would go into the community to teach these courses. This has been very much a part of what happened in Black Studies later in the 60s, an attempt to make knowledge relevant. The key word was relevant to the Black community, and not simply relevant to the established standards of the institutions that had been racist and exclusionary regarding Black people.
So I just want to notice and point out, Brother Kaba, that nowhere was the name Hampton University mentioned. So you know, you just gonna have to sit with that as the focus was elsewhere in Dr. Alkali's.
Let me speak to that. There is so much that has been left out. Guilty as charged.
No, I just like to mess with these cats that go to these lesser HBCUs like Hampton. You know, that you know. Now I'm not thrilled that, of course, we got to deal with more reference to
Dr. Ball,
Howard.
Dr. Ball.
But you know, as long as there's nothing said of Hampton, I'll take that as a small victory.
Well, you know, it's fun. It's funny though, because when you ask that question about Black studies at HBCUs and why, you know, there's such a lack of them, it's funny. We asked the same question when I was at Hampton, and the president's response is that, well, this is a Black university, this is already a HBCU, so therefore you get it by default. And of course that wasn't sufficient. So basically we had to, you know, study on our own, which is the best way to learn anyway. But it was unfortunate because Hampton is an extremely conservative. I mean, all HBCUs generally are a little more conservative, but Hampton is probably at the top when it comes to conservative HBCUs. It's very conservative.
Well, I think Dr. Alkalima, you actually have somewhat spoken to this, but I think that because we've also heard the same thing at Morgan already in just these first couple of semesters, the same thing. Well, why do we need a Black studies if we're at an HBCU and studying? Isn't that Black study? So, but you sort of already, you know, talked about, you know, the history of this field, but could you talk a little bit about why that isn't sufficient necessarily to say we're just Black and studying, so therefore it's Black studies?
Yeah. One of the interesting aspects of Black Studies as social movement was a program created by SOBU, Save and Change the Black College. In other words, the Black College had a particular historical role that should be preserved, and yet at the same time changed so that it becomes more relevant. And of course, that's contextual, so it changes over time in terms of what those things mean. But yes, the interesting thing about the HBCU is that one of the main functions of the HBCU is to serve as a bridge, as a pathway for the students to be able to excel. And a lot of times that meant being able to leave the college to go to a mainstream institution for graduate school or for law school or professional school. And that was the sort of the pathway. And so there was this attempt to mold the school to meet the gatekeepers of the next set of institutions. On the other hand, in any HBCU, there's always been this person, this faculty member, this program that gave some connection to what we now would like to see as Black studies. Sometimes that showed up in the library of collecting material and making that available, although it wasn't always central to the curriculum. Nevertheless, another silence in this whole matter are the Black librarians that have been the keepers of the record. This is a very important aspect of the HBCU experience. But the important thing here is that the curriculum in focusing on Black studies is really an agency against a racist negation of the Black experience. And without that singular focus, the importance of sort of opening minds, opening the possibility of transforming this society is missed. So in every HBCU today, given the integration into the mainstream, there's even more of a challenge to connect to the people in the community that are being excluded. This becomes a class question. This becomes an agency of social change question, but it also becomes a question of survival, because these HBCUs require fundraising. And so we've got a crisis now of to what extent the HBCU can become more socially and politically and economically relevant to the excluded working class and poor people in the Black community, while at the same time being able to raise the resources necessary to pay the bills and keep these institutions open. Because as we know, certain institutions are closing. They're running into that economic crisis, so that we have really a practical problem. It's not just an ideological problem, of what we would like. The question is, how do you make a program that is survivable, that can achieve the maximum of what's possible? That's really the crisis that we face. And so really, I think that the little exchange you all have been having calls on the alumni of, for example, Hampton or Morgan, et cetera, to ask the question, to what extent are you willing to make sure that these institutions can survive, at the same time becoming more relevant to the Black community in terms of the 21st century, the issues that we're facing today?
Mm. Hey, listen, as we move into a further discussion of your book, and particularly this section that you have on Black studies and social movements, I'd like to, if we can, just because it's working out this way, bring our other comrade and sister, Dr. Mjiba Freyawat, up here, who, among other things, is a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. She is also a comrade of mine in the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the Blacklash Africana Collective, and she is also the creator of the recently produced film Umoja, African People Must Unite Now, or Africa Must Unite Now. So Dr. Freyawat, good morning. Well, at least on our end, I think good evening or afternoon.
Afternoon. It's 1:17 in Ghana. Thank you so much for having me, and I do apologize for my tardiness.
No, it's all good. It's good to see you. I'm happy to have us all be in conversation. And I think in many ways, Dr. Freyawat is perfect, given her activism and long standing work in social movements, to be part of this next part of this discussion, or the next question that I wanted to at least raise, and others can obviously raise their own, is about Black studies as a social movement, which is the title of part 2 in your book, Dr. Alkalimat. And then you seem to you have these other chapters laid out. I really cannot wait. I hate that I don't have the book yet, but so are you saying that Black studies is a component of, or in relationship to, these other movements you have listed here: freedom, Black power, Black arts, new communist, Black women, Black student? Or is it a combination thereof? Is it supportive? What are you doing there? I can't wait to get this thing. Yeah.
I guess the main argument is that Black people are rational about their experience. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that every time something significant happens, there is usually an educational component to it. Okay. I guess one of the silences in the book is really the Black church. Mm-hmm. I really don't deal with the Black church as such, but it really is a silence in the book that should be corrected, because obviously Black liberation theology has been a very important part of the sort of post-Black power period, because in terms of Black studies as social movement, it really was Black power that sort of woke everybody up, and it was carried forward by the Black arts movement in very important ways. And I go into that movement in terms of the conferences, the journals, the organizations by genre, the musical organizations, AACM in Chicago, and many others, the literary organizations of writers coming together, the Black theater groups coming together, and even places like ETA in Chicago, where they only produced original work and therefore created a whole new development of people who were writing plays. So we have this explosion of creativity within the context of Black Studies. So really, Black Studies is the reflection on and the celebration of the Black experience.
I did want to ask, I'll sort of try to create a parallel or a kind of, anyway, but I, Dr. Freya-Watt, we were talking about briefly this film you've created, and it's and the 3 points that I wanted to highlight very, very, very quickly that I tried to in that little review that I'm so impressed by are that not only are you promoting Pan-Africanism at a time where I think there's another backlash against it, you are engaged with a lot of younger people and folks on the continent, shattering yet another myth that continental Africans somehow have never or are not interested in Pan-Africanism. And then you center women, and not only that, but are yourself both a woman, but someone who is actually an adherent to these politics, which is something I've become increasingly frustrated by, as so many people who talk about these histories don't really care about them or like them or agree with them or support the movements. And there is this, I'm asking sort of both of you, I'll start with Dr. Freya-Watt, but as the emergence of Black Studies, there is at least a component, if I'm saying this correctly or describing it correctly, that says we need to become more international in our focus. And hence some of the discussion around Africana studies and so could you just say a little bit about your film, Dr. Freya-Watt, and anything about what I've said of its importance as I see it, and how it does relate to what Dr. Al-Kalimat is saying here about the importance of Black studies?
Excellent. Thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank you for reviewing the film. I responded back to Jared that he was literally like in my head or in our editing sessions when we were editing the film, because he described it perfectly. We set out to, and to be honest, I set out to do research around the contributions of the African diaspora to Ghanaian cultural life. And what I found was Pan-Africanism really sort of outplayed or outshined any of these contributions, right? And I say it with air quotes because everyone makes contributions. But even the least Pan-African person in Ghana and even connected to Ghana had some Pan-African story. And so then I began to think about, I am so sick and tired of hearing the Pan-African story from the diaspora as if there's no story of Pan-Africanism on the continent. And I'm working at the Institute of African Studies, and who better to, have this conversation with than my colleagues who, like one of the features, Dr. Edamodote, he teaches Pan-Africanism and the history of Pan-Africanism at the master's level. A sister called Namata, who is coincidentally from Uganda. She is in the Economic Fighters League in Ghana, right? And one of the leading forces behind our Fix the Country campaign, right? And then we have Sister Mama Afua, who is in the APRP, working in the Volta region and organizing also in that region. We had sprinklers of sort of other contributions, Prof. Essie Sutherland Adi, Rabbi Cohen, Professor George Chikata, our director, Professor Horace Campbell. And then as we began to do this, it just emerged organically that women were at the forefront, and also that continental Africans were telling the story. And we wanted to authentically allow everyone in the documentary to tell their analysis and contribution of Pan-Africanism. And of course, Dr. Nyaka Laguke from Lincoln University was in the documentary as well. And one of the things that I wanted to connect this to Black Studies is at Lincoln, there's a Pan-Africana or Pan-Africa it's either Pan Africa or Pan Africana Studies department now, and it's a major, and in that program is headed by Dr. Zizwe Poe, who has done a lot of work around Nkrumah, right? And one of the things that this program is trying to do is the program is trying to break these myths of Black studies and begin to look and see how we can push Black studies, you know, to the next level, right? And how we can break the bounds between Black studies or quote unquote African American studies, Africana studies, and African studies. And at Lincoln, like not this semester, but last semester, I taught a class on Pan-African women where we looked at everyone from Madam Kuti, Fela Kuti's mother, to Amy Jacques Garvey, to Shirley Graham Du Bois, to Hannah Kojo, right? And so I'm agreeing with Prof in that, you know, we need to push Black studies beyond the confounds of America and look at it from a very global Africa perspective. Prof. Campbell, when he was our Nkrumah chair here, he said, we need to be thinking about global Africa, the continent and the diaspora together. So I don't know if that was a long-winded, roundabout
No, that was great.
But that's my response. Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be on the platform.
No, of course. I'm going to mute you for now, just because to keep the echo. But Dr. Alkalima, care to respond or add on to any of that? And in particular, does your book deal with this particular development of, or how do you see the rise of sort of internationalism, Pan-Africanism, the push for an Africana studies? In terms of title and you know, anything, you know.
Of course, the one of the interesting ways to sort of measure the ideological content of Black studies is what the programs are named. And so there is this transition. I mean, Black studies was the assertion, the anti-racist assertion at its origin. And now there's this transition toward Africana studies as the sort of more popular name. But there's an interesting difference between the East Coast and the West Coast in the United States, because on the West Coast, you have the Black Latino connection. And therefore, you have more of an ethnic, an umbrella that includes both those interests. Whereas on the East Coast, it's much more Africana studies. But this is very interesting because I have two other books coming out. And one book is Africa World Press is a study of the African Liberation Support Committee, ALSC. This is a very important organization, 1972 to 1975. And many of the activists were in Black studies. And therefore, this was a movement that was really connected to Black studies that advanced at a critical time of African liberation, of the 6 armed struggles that were taking place, to, you know, sort of that last mile pushing over the victory against, you know, formal colonialism, albeit to neocolonialism. But the point is, there was this tremendous advance. Then, after the history of Black studies, I have a book in process now called The Future of Black Studies. And one of the interesting things about the future of Black studies is exactly this question of the diaspora. And so I have case studies of 15 different countries and the way in which Black studies has been taken up. But one of the interesting things about the continent, and obviously Ghana is a central case because of Nkrumah's development of not only the Institute of African Studies, where the sister was talking about, but also the Ideological Institute and other things that he did that were, you know, really systemically important for all of Africa. But here's an interesting question. Most of the African diaspora outside of Africa studies Africa. But if you ask the question, who is studying African Americans? There's a silence. And so we have to really engage the brothers and sisters on the continent to begin to think about the global experience of the African diaspora. Because without a study of the African American experience, it allows for an idealism about the escape from the economic and social crisis in Africa to the West, as if you were going somewhere to have a much better life. And you then are blind to the actual experience of the African Americans, and therefore the possibility of unity, so that we have this movement in the United States about people who were born here. I mean, all those conflicts happen, and we have to figure out a way to have the dialogue.
Wait a minute. Are you saying, wait a minute, I'm asking everybody here, and where's this echo coming from? My bad. I know it's not you, but wait a minute. Is it accurate to say, I don't read enough in general anymore, but I certainly don't read enough outside. I don't read anything outside the English language, but are we really saying that there is a lack of study of the Black experience in the United States by Africans outside of the United States? Is that, I've never even considered that question. I have to admit that I've never considered that question. Anybody please add on or respond? I must say I'm a little shocked by that.
Well, I think we could turn to the sister in Ghana and what's happening there. What's happening at Legon?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, to be honest, the brother's 100% correct. I think there is a divide ideologically, and there's a global South, global North divide, even in African and Africana studies. I teach in an African diaspora course to the undergraduate level at Legon, but to be honest with you, there is not a lot of research around the U.S. or the Black experience, and part of that is because of neoliberalism, and let me explain to you why. And part of that is because if you look at the era of structural adjustment, right, in Ghana or throughout the continent, there was really a huge defunding of education across the continent, right? And so you have a situation where, you know, many institutions are very pay for play. It's very elitist. It's very difficult to get in. But a result of that is that there's not high endowments. There's not necessarily there's government what is the government is putting money in government funding, but it's not at the level that it needs to be because there's been such a backlog, with the exception of South Africa, which is a whole different ballgame, right? And so the salary, the research funds, what's interesting to do research on really is often based on where you can get to on your meager salary. And so, for example, it's difficult for somebody to sit in Ghana and do research on you know, the Harlem Renaissance and the new manifestation of the Harlem Renaissance of the 21st century. It's quite difficult to do that, especially if you want to get primary source data, right? And so I think that there's that serious issue, is there's a lack of funding in order to get beyond the continent to do the work. But the other thing is, it's not as if Ghanaians, for example, go and do a whole bunch of research in Tanzania. It's not like, you know, Tanzanians are deep up in Ghana doing research, and much of it has to do with funding. And it's unfortunate that in the academy, I hate to say it, but it's true, diasporan Africans or folks in the academy in the US have more access to research dollars, and therefore they can do much of the research on the ground. But there is a huge divide, and this is something we really need to address. And organizations such as Panifest, for example, would be great organizations and institutions to partner with to begin to do some of this cross, you know, tri-continental research. But 100%, I agree. And I'll say this, you know, when you talk to Legon students and you say, okay, so, you know, where do you find Black people outside of Africa? They can name some places. Beyond naming places, that's where it stops. And so not only at the university is there not a robust sort of conversation beyond even America. I mean, we're not talking about Brazil. We're not talking about Cuba. We're not talking about Venezuela. I mean, even talking about America, which most people have access to, the information is very slim. And so that's definitely something. There needs to be this kind of cross educational, ideological research, bridges that we build even in our economic constraints. I will however, say that I am not the only person that teaches diaspora. I have a colleague, Dr. Obadiah Toto, who teaches diaspora. He's very much a Ghanaian. I have a colleague, Dr. Edamodote, who is, teaching a class on African sort of slavery, the Black experience program. I have a colleague, Dr. Ntawusu, who just knocked on my door, who also does some of this work. And so we do it within the capacity in which we're able to do it. But because of many of these other kind of structural adjustment and neoliberal related issues, it becomes difficult to do a deep dive, for example, in a place that you've perhaps never been, or can't get a visa to go, or don't have enough money or time to get in there and, for example, house yourself in a New York or wherever, here are some of the difficulties for why that happens. So long story short, again, 100% agree.
I want to just give a quick word about my own experience at the University of Ghana. First of all, I'm a fellow at the Commonwealth Hall. And so, I have a connection. And at a certain point, I was running the Black Studies program at the University of Toledo, and we brought Professor Nkunya, who was a top administrator, was head of the sociology department, et cetera. We brought him to the University of Toledo, and at which point he developed a course an online course, so that then he went back to the university in Ghana and was teaching students in the US from Ghana. This is very important because the online education had previously been from the United States or England into Ghana. And we wanted to impact the brain drain so that you could get Africa content from Africa. And one of the interesting things is that I was able to get an agreement from the administration to donate land, because there's a lot of land at the University of Ghana. And the thought was this: if we have 300 to 400 Black Studies programs, maybe we could get programs to contribute money to build a building at the University of Ghana for an African American Studies program at the University of Ghana that would have a couple of apartments for visiting faculty, that would have a computer lab, that would have classrooms, etc. In other words, the disposable income really of all these Black Studies programs in the United States could be aggregated to create an initiative that would have profound impact. You could rotate faculty members in so that more and more faculty from the U.S. African American Studies programs would have an African experience as well as their children. We would be able then to have exchanges where students from Ghana would come to the U.S. and so on, not just for those quick summer programs, but for something a little bit deeper. See, I think this history of Black Studies is a wonderful thing in terms of reflecting on the past. But the real impact is, what does the past teach us about what we ought to be doing today?
Well, Dr. Alkali-Mott, let me, if I can jump in real quick, because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, which is this contradiction that has been written about in terms of the history of Black Studies of funding. Ford, Mellon, Carnegie, whoever, my beloved Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell under the great Dr. James Turner, where you and I first crossed paths, Dr. Alkali-Mott, some years ago. It was brought up, not only is it at Cornell, obviously, but it got, Ford money. It gets, so there's all this question about So as you look at, as I know you've written about the history, and I'm hearing now that you've written about the future of Black studies, and you're talking about this great idea, programmatic idea. What can we learn from that history, that contradictory history of funding, and where obviously we're still stuck in that contradiction? What can we learn?
A lot of our ideas are often remain abstract. Like, take the concept self-determination. What the hell does that mean? Well, in a very simple, straightforward thing, it means do for yourself. What are the freedoms that you have? So, for example, one of the tremendous things is that a classroom is not only a site of intellectual consumption, it's a site of intellectual production. And if you think about the students that are in all of our classes, there are thousands of hours every semester of intellectual production. But when we talk about the word discipline, academic discipline, we're a discipline. Well, where's the discipline with regard to the hours of intellectual production? So that, for example, I have a program of action. I think everybody in Black Studies got a copy of it. And anybody that wants a copy, I'll send you a copy of 10 different projects that should be done. For example, just to give you an example, the history of every Black Studies program. We don't have that. And that's one of the greatest projects of the Black Power movement. 50 years from now, all of the activists that were involved are not going to be around. But do we have the research that tells the story? We've got the slave narratives. What about Black Studies? There's also the history of every Black community. We need a history of every Black community and the struggles that have taken place there. We need a history of the movement. If Black Studies faculty would only collaborate, I'm not talking about changing your research program and whatever it is you're doing as your own individual thing. I'm talking about our curriculum. I'm talking about our collective behavior. What can we do that really maximizes intellectual productivity? I know there can be another reflection on Toni Morrison's work. I think we need more of that, but there's these silences that we have. So anyway, this question of self-determination. So even if you take Black Studies, there's disposable income that we actually have control of. Building a building in Ghana, what would it take? $50,000, $100,000? We could do that. If there are 300 programs, how much money does each program have to create in order to be able to build that kind of building? And then maybe we could wake up somebody in basketball or football. I mean, I really don't like to talk about that because, anyway, the point is there's enough money in the Black community that could be leveraged to create something that would have tremendous impact. So Black Studies we've barely begun what needs to be done for the fullness of what we could do.
When you all were just talking, I was just thinking of a lot of things, and particularly about this whole notion of, our understanding of Africans globally. And I can remember, once upon a time being in the military and being stationed in Central America and being surprised to see Black people down there. I didn't know that, because I was raised here in America, so I had no idea. And I think that mostly what we know of each other in terms of, to the extent that we know anything at all, is based on caricatures, whether it be Africans in the United States or Africans on the continent or Africans wherever we may be. There's all these kind of caricatures that have been created by people, by Western education, by miseducation. And then earlier we were talking about, the Black studies and just the fact that there's a paucity of Black studies at Black universities. And I was thinking about the fact that white universities, and usually the reasoning is that, well, this is a Black university, so we don't need it. But we don't see that at white universities. PWIs, they study Greek You know, they studied the Romans, and so, and even that, and then I thought about that as I was working through that thought. I thought about the fact that when I was at Hampton, we studied the classics. So so-called classics, right? Which is what Greece and Rome, you know, and all the, you know, European history. So even but then as I thought even more through that, generally speaking, Africans on the continent, that's what they learn. You know, the French, the Francophone countries believe that they literally, some of them believe that they actually, come from the Gauls and the Franks and stuff. And so we have that same kind of thing in the Anglophone countries and others as well. So I think that's obviously it's systematic and it's emblematic of, just colonization and neo-colonization. And y'all were talking about, Cornell, which I believe is in Ithaca, which, is like the mythical Greek island with Odyssey. And I remember reading the Odyssey and the Iliad in high school, and I remember Ithaca. So when you're talking about Cornell, so even they literally, they named they put one of their top universities in a place named after, one of their, antecedents, in terms of European history and culture. So and even Cambridge, when you talk about Harvard, Cambridge is based on Cambridge, the university in the UK. So they have this understanding of this continuity of their cultural roots. And I think it's high time that we do the same. So all those are just some of the thoughts that I had. And then lastly, I'll say just a connection between Sister Majiba and Dr. Al-Kalima is great memories of when I was working at Karibu Books, of offering to people who wanted to have something for their young folks to read, Malcolm X for Beginners. That was one of the books I would always, give to people so that they can have a better understanding of Malcolm X. And I can remember, I believe, Sister Majiba, you were at Howard, like, I don't know if you were in grad school or you were getting your doctorate, but you used to come through all the time and buy like tons of books, from Karibu. So that's back when I had the bald head. So we go way back with that. So that's just a confluence of,
we're all connected.
We're all connected,
Yeah. Anybody want to add on or respond to any?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful about this question of Greece and Rome. We don't want to not study Greece and Rome, but we want to study it from a Black perspective. In other words, the idea that we are sort of taking ourselves out of a global context. No, Black studies is the reverse. We're trying to put ourselves into a global context.
That's right.
And so if you look at, for example, what Black scholars are doing in England, they're rethinking British history by looking at the Black experience that has been silenced. The same thing is true in France. The same thing is true in Germany. So that suddenly when we look at these countries and we look at it from a Black perspective, we suddenly see, wait a minute, Black people have been there all along and have played different roles. So we have to learn not to isolate ourselves, but rather to agency, to bring ourselves read ourselves into global history. That's really the game that's been played on us. Of course, this then brings up Afrocentrism. This brings up Egypt. This brings up all kinds of theoretical issues. And unfortunately, given the course of our movement, we've had sort of a polarity of struggle, of contradictions. And we need to really, in Black studies in particular, step back to really see the contributions of the different perspectives, so that we can come up with what we have historically called a paradigm of unity. There are differences, of course, differences in perspectives, but that's true in every science, in every field. And so the issue really is how to understand these different perspectives and how to learn from them. And that's really the challenge of Black studies, is not to fall victim to this polarity and this polemic that really leads to ignorance versus idealism. We need knowledge.
Listen, I saw, at the risk of bringing any more Connecticut into this discussion than is necessary, I did peek into the chat and I saw Brother Hiram Rivera asking what I think is a question about when we raised this question of Africans on the continent studying African America. And he said something to the fact that if most of the enslaved Africans brought this way were dispersed throughout the Americas, and I think only 5% made it to the United States, why then a particular interest in studying the Black experience in the United States as opposed to the rest of the Americas? And I think he was asking, is this another one of those tendencies towards America bias, et cetera, and so forth? So I did want to bring that to our guests, our panel here. What do you all think about that?
Hi, give me just a second. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm in my office. And a professor is yelling at me from across the hall.
This is the point I was making. You are a Pan-African doing Pan-Africanism, so we get what we get. We take what we get.
She don't have a secretary. She don't have a secretary.
You don't have a secretary. She don't have a
to screen
staff.
people.
This is Zimjiba. You catch it. It's her constantly working and swinging. Absolutely.
I'm so sorry about that, but I think that's an excellent question, right? And I think that I would contend that the continent needs to interrogate, research, and investigate the diaspora, and I think, and vice versa, right? I wouldn't necessarily push it straight to the Black American experience, but I would say that the Black American experience, let me not say Black American, let me say the Black Power movement in the US around the African Liberation Day Committee, African Liberation Day, and during this not the height, but one of the ups or the ebbs of the Pan-African movement, around sort of the Kwame Ture, Bob Brown, Amina Kouate, these kind of folks, Newton and X, Y, and Z. I think there were some linkages to the continent that must be explored, right? And I'm thinking about with Nkrumah and Sekou Touré and Thomas Sankara, right? And I'm thinking about, with Amilcar Cabral, for example, and the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And so while I agree that we should not have a laser focus on the Black experience in America, I think there are particular moments in this sort of African Liberation Day movement, which is really interesting, and I think can be bridges between this experience and the continent. And I also think that when we begin to also triangulate sort of the transatlantic slave trade, we can then also tie some of these experiences together. Because, for example, like when Prof is saying, we need to focus on the African American or Black experience, I am suggesting that, I will suggest, but I hope he means this, that this also includes Nani of the Maroons, right? Which is 100% not in America, right? This includes 1804 in Haiti, right? So I think that there's this certainly not a narrow view of the African American experience, but there, in my opinion, there should be an expansion of research around the Black liberation, Black power, and African liberation movements in and around the Western Hemisphere and the diaspora. And I would even go so far as to say, we got to kick that back to Europe as well, because there was some serious movement on the ground in the UK during this period, and even looking at, Brazil, where you've got this sort of heavy, Pan-African capoeira experience, right? So I don't think it's just the African-American experience. I think it's looking at the diaspora and seeing some of these critical connections. That's just me. I hope I'm not putting words into your mouth, Prof.
First of all, the question of the diaspora, one has to be inclusive of the entire diaspora. So that's in terms of the Black experience. So that's clear. I do want to speak to the particularity of the U.S. what is required of all oppressed people in the world is eye on the enemy. And the United States is a singular country in regards to the global conditions that Black people face everywhere in the world, for that matter, whether they're in Europe or anywhere in Latin America, Central America, etc. And if you look at Latin America and Central America, you see the draw of people there into the US. So the US is a dominant force in those countries, the Caribbean, and certainly Africa. And the reason why it's important for African Americans to be studied by Africans is because they can see the future in terms of capitalism. They can see the future in terms of the West in general. They can see the future in terms of what's happening in the continent. For example, if you go to a barber shop, what are they doing? They're advertising the hairstyles of people in the US. If you go to the youth, what are the youth doing? The youth are playing hip hop. I just sent out a thing about graffiti throughout the continent. So Africans are already taking the lead of what's happening by African Americans. Everybody wants gym shoes and blue jeans. We have to attack that, and we can't just say, well, you know, it's just the same everywhere. It's not the same everywhere. Imperialism in the world, whether it's cultural, intellectual, social, economic, etc., has a hierarchy, and we happen to be in the belly of the beast. And so we have a responsibility to help everybody understand what this Western capitalist decaying civilizational crisis really is. So, you know, I mean, I think we ought to study everywhere. You know, I mean, Jamaica, you know, Haiti, my God, if we don't study Haiti, what can we learn about, you know, what the West has done to Black people? But on the other hand, we better pay attention to the US, whether it's Trump or Biden. We have to really understand what the battle is. And the battle is what we want people to become knowledgeable and culturally prepared to engage in. So I agree with the sister, but then there's this other point as well.
So, look, unfortunately, you know, we do have to start to wrap up here. Let me give any of you or all of you any concluding thoughts, and I hope to have all of you back, you know, whenever. And Dr. Alkalimat, I mean, I got to read this new book, and then I got to read your next new book. You know, but I definitely would like to have you back as well, and especially since I'm going to be getting to use your book in our class next semester. Definitely would want to bring you back for a discussion with them and us about, you know, more. Anyways, I get the chance to read it. But anyway, I'll start with you, Dr. Alkalimat. Any last words for us today? And again, thank you very much for joining us.
I mean, I would just like to applaud your effort to have the sister from Ghana and to have, you know, that level of global discourse. I mean, we are practicing what we were just talking about. So fabulous. And I'd like to come back to Ghana someday, and I'm going to come back someday. I mean, I've been there several times, and I'm coming back again. And thank you, Jared. Appreciate being able to be on, and I look forward to the future of all of us gathering together. So,
and again, and thank you very much. And again, for those who are unfortunately may not be aware, you know, your work has been really important, and the e-letters and the keeping us all up to date with what was happening in the field. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work that you have been doing and continue to do. I appreciate it greatly, and thanks again for joining us. Yeah, go ahead, Kaba.
And if we wanted to get, because you mentioned the 10 points for Black Studies, if people wanted to get that or just stay in contact with you, how could we do that?
Yeah, the email me, and I'll send it to you. That's McWhorter@illinois.edu.
think I already-
MCWO.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
MCWORTER at illinois.edu.
And that's not John McWhorter. That's
No.
okay.
This is the descendant of Free Frank McWhorter.
Well,
This
okay,
brother here, my great-great-grandfather, was the first African American to found a town in the United States legally, 1836. And so I don't know this other guy. I don't know how he got the name McWhorter, but that's our name.
Yeah, well, that's one of Dr. Ball's favorite scholars, John.
Even for an imposed name on an African community, he does a disservice to even that. That's so like that's but folks, I'll also make this available. I'll put a link to it
Okay.
you know, and make it available and put the link in the show notes for this show as well. And I would encourage, if you know, anybody who isn't and to sign up for Dr. Alkalimat's listserv, and there's alkalimat.org as well. But anyway, we'll make this available and
Thank
as
you.
well and share it. And thank you. Dr. Freya Watt, any concluding words for us this morning or this afternoon for you?
This afternoon, exactly. First of all, again, apologies
Again, American
for being.
Citric, brother.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
You
Terrible.
need to be Afro.
Even as I'm wearing the shirt, I mean, it's
Look at that. I mean,
Exactly, the amazing
man.
African
the man
t-shirt.
got you.
And you see, no, I'm grateful to be on this platform with such amazing professors who have been doing it, you know, and I've written down all your new books and all your old books that I don't have, and I definitely am going to get them and use them, because we're actually trying to even like develop some new courses around social movements in diaspora as well, right? So these are all really, really important pieces. I just want to encourage everyone, if they want to watch the film Umoja Africa Must Unite Now, they can go to the Kwame Nkrumah, the third Kwame Nkrumah Intellectual Festival, and just watch it for free. And there's like a whole bunch of other films there, and there's all of this, the seminars and the presentations. There was like really robust discussions. There was a youth conference. There was a film series, a cultural performance, and well as a main symposium. As everyone knows, you know, Professor Mina Mama is our current Nkrumah chair here at the Institute of African Studies. So you all know it was live with Amina Mama as our chair. So if anyone is interested in attending, just Google Third Kwame Nkrumah Festival, and there's a link, and all of the films are there and all the festival recordings. So please, while it's still up, go and catch it, because this is also ways to, you know, move beyond our space as well. Because what that'll do is that'll help us, you know, make those connections without even leaving our classroom or our living room or our office for this one, or our home studio. Thank you very much. I'm so grateful, and we're certainly welcome and excited to come back whenever.
Of course, no doubt. Hey, listen, thanks all of you for coming on. Thanks to everybody in the chat, everybody who's going to see this later. We appreciate you as well. As Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace because we know you're willing to fight for it. Thanks again to everybody. Appreciate you. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like live and throughout the Black Power Media platform. Peace, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like.